Hello, everybody. Welcome to the LEAF Colectivo. With me today is Noelle Shine, who's joining us to speak all things beauty and how do you build the brand in the beauty space? How do you go in internationalization or taking it out of the out into the world? Difficult word for me to pronounce that one, but yeah, really about putting everything together in a line to become a smash success in the market. So thank you, Noel. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be chatting, especially about the beauty business.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been learning quite quite a lot more, I guess, for lack of a better word, of the beauty space. Obviously, we have a handful of brands in our portfolio, but getting kind of like behind the scenes view on how do you go and build one, how do you start from scratch, really. Personally, probably not in the beauty space, but I've always admired Joe Malone, and what they've been able to, what she was able to accomplish before in the
Mm.
space of um, kind of like body lotions and and soaps and perfumes and stuff, and probably there has a lot of commonalities with beauty in a way. I mean, in the way that it has to build trust and loyalty and everything, and it's also a super crowded space. Uh, but really, about building, that sort of brand and on beauty has all these other level of challenges, and we were discussing off camera some of those. Now, obviously, you've built, a brand yourself. You're also incubated a lot of brands yourself, and now you're on the consulting side. So obviously,
Mm.
you have been exposed to a lot of that, those challenges, experiences, and
Yeah.
wings.
Yeah, well, my first independent client was actually Joe Malone. So, I'd worked for Estee Lauder, and they bought Joe Malone, and I was lucky enough. It was just lucky to get the right timing to go in to support her next level of brand growth. And I think, what I really found there was so inspirational in terms of somebody that lived and breathed her brand, was incredibly clever about the business. And it's those two things. It's got to be, you've got this amazing concept, you've got this amazing identity, you've built out an audience, which she had in this incredible way with Elton John's white tie diamonds ball. And she used to leave all these little gifts and also have an amazing client when she was a facialist. But also then to work with her team, her husband Gary, to look at, how do we go to next stage of a successful business, to be able to really put in the elements that the team understand to be able to replicate her and take it forward, to put in the operational structure. And actually, with her, that was quite a bit of work with the team, quite a bit of work in looking at how does this concept translate from a standalone store into a department store. So we launched it in Brown Thomas and then started this rollout in stores. But it really was that combination of somebody who had such charisma, but also, oh my gosh, so smart in terms of the way that she wanted to do business and she knew what she wanted to do. Um, so yes, that was the first lesson that I had, having had a real background in stores, running cosmetic departments, and then actually working for Estee Lauder through all the different roles up until the sales director. And I think that really helped me get that kind of organized corporate head on, and then combine that with the founder mentality. And from there, I really wanted to do that more. So I started working with lots of independent founders by myself back in 2005. So it's been a while.
Well, I think, like part of that experience, and I'm sure, like being right as a team and looking at that transition, obviously we're going to be speaking, a little bit about that today. Most people, when they go setting up anything, and especially, like beauty, there is an element of um, personal touch, or your personality really gets in view in
Mm.
the product. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, most founders are trying to fill a niche that they feel hasn't been covered yet, and they're take it from a personal standpoint, but all the way to exiting that. because ultimately at the end of the day, like you will want to realize that investment, of energy and all that. So I think that really plays a goal into what we've been discussing today, and I think probably we can even take it to a time where obviously as through an incubator and the experience that you had there,
Yeah.
like you were saying before, taking it from an idea to an actual product and then to market,
Yes.
and then the next stage from that.
Yeah. It
So
is
really
exactly
being
those.
intentional in many ways from the onset of what you're doing.
That's exactly right, and it's hard because I think many founders, and it is a founder-led beauty business. People want to connect with people, so founder-led beauty businesses do so considerably better today because the founder has a story. That translates into the concept, the range, and the products, and that's really where I start in the incubation process. It's getting to know the founder, understanding their huge vision, and quite often the passion is so great. It's hard to really focus that into a concept that relates to who the customer is at the heart of it, but then what does that look like as a business model? And I think if that work is done up front, the story translate into concept, translate, with the customer at the heart, translate into business model, that's where you can really start to plan out your journey, whilst remembering it's a constantly evolving world. Things will change. You may have to be nimble. But if what is the kind of really at the heart and the core of your brand that differentiates you in an incredibly crowded market, the consumer is confused. She buys, not just a product, she buys into your brand story, she buys into your brand values. You need to really set that out very clearly at the start and then understand how you translate to a business model. And I think that's a little bit where sometimes some branders are brilliant, some founders are brilliant at it, some aren't. They get stuck, on that next bit of, who's my customer? Where do I sell this? Because knowing where you're going to distribute, even if you go D2C at the start, omnichannel is really, the buzzword. Even if you utilize omnichannel to get, grow your sales online and grow your awareness, you have to have priced it right. You have to have thought about how will my range fit into this retailer, and all the time, how is my customer going to buy into my brand, continue shopping my brand, really start to love my brand beyond the product. So I build community, so I build advocacy and loyalty, frequency and return. There's a lot of work that can be done up front that can save a lot of pain later and expensive mistakes.
Well, that's great to hear, and I think beauty, compared to other products, have that omni-channel, have that retail side of things very in view, probably since the
Mm.
early on, because something that is key to build with your customer is that trust and loyalty, but also at the end of the day, you need to test the product on on your own, and obviously that whole retail part of it plays a role, and I think nowadays more retailers are open, to carry some of these newer products, and they have to also be part of the game. And I think, some retailers like Sephora and and department stores and stuff, like, I think they're starting to play a role in doing that and enabling that connection and channel to customer. Obviously, it's their customer, not yours, but it's also how do you
Oh,
start
it's a
building that
shared
connection, that
customer.
community.
I think it's a share. It's absolutely a shared customer because I think, obviously it's easier to launch today than it used to be, but that's really hard. There's a lot of steps and a lot of cost on the way, and smart ways of doing things that can reduce that. And because of D2C and because of manufacturing, it's easier to bring a brand to market than it used to be. However, constantly acquiring an audience, that cost has gone up. Bringing them back, that cost has gone up, but it's also costly to go into stores. So finding the right partnership and having considered that in your costings and your pricings early days is really important. But it is a shared journey. So, a retailer is going to look at your brand. Does it plug a gap in the market? Does it plug a gap in their offering? There's no point in them diluting something they've already got. And I think the biggest thing is, do you have an audience? Do you have an audience that's truly engaged, not just a one-hit wonder, but that is truly engaged, that, as you say, wants to come into their stores to experience the brand. But a journey doesn't go to one or the other, does it? It's kind of like, something like 82% discover in research before they even go into a store. So a lot of customers today come in quite empowered, with questions, but what they want to do is talk to somebody personally. They want to touch, feel, and smell. They want to maybe ask some questions, and that's why beauty is such a personal category. It's all about your self-expression. It's massively personal, whether it's your skin type, where you like to look, your style. It's quite an emotional category. So I think connecting that journey is the biggest challenge today in beauty. How does that customer experience feel consistent when there's so many fragmented avenues that and touch points the customer will have touched on the way to actually then convert into a purchase? Um, yeah.
Yeah. So without, obviously, we can be talking here for hours and, even do a masterclass about what does it take to take a product to market and then,
I
grow it
do
and,
those.
and then and take it to market. And, for the purposes of today, I mean, it would be great to probably, kind of like if we were to dip in a little bit on that 0 to 1, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
0 to kind of like 10th of a one, and then and then from there on, because I think it's I'm sure, and despite the fact that the great majority of our audience are already in market, already have a product, and probably we can focus there. I'm sure there will be an audience that will find this conversation quite useful and
Mm.
understanding that early bit, right? Like, how do you start thinking about your market, like you were saying, your customer, and then from the onset start thinking about that internationalization of your product, right? And
Yeah.
taking it, it's almost like having that visionary view and going into the future only to come back and start putting
Yes.
the seeds forward.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I always, when I do clinics or advisory, I always talk to them about how big, think big, 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 big. And then actually let's start again and work out and map the way that we want to get there, even if the end journey and the end destination slightly changes. But look, it starts with a vision. It can start two ways. It can start by spotting a gap in the market, a problem that needs to be solved. It can start from a problem I've personally got that actually nobody is sorting for me. It can start from deep expertise and it might be a doctor or a makeup artist, a perfumer. How do I translate my services into product that complement my services? Because I think there is this, from that idea, a lot of founders should ask themselves, why do I have the right to own this story, this brand, this expertise? Where's my credibility, or where's my story that is going to really connect? It's those two things. And I think, like Dr. Brands, for example, grow 3 times faster than skincare, which is the fastest growing category, because people want proof. There's too many options. I don't want to waste my money. A retailer doesn't want to waste their money. And so it will start there, but it also then it's that phrase of who cares? That's great, it's beautiful, but who cares? As in, who really cares about this enough to become your customer? And why wouldn't they go elsewhere for it? So, there is a whole clinic that I often take clients to around those elements up front that give the vision and also give the personality and the character, the succinct storyline, but translate that into get inside the customer's mind that you're identifying, and how do they feel about your brand? What is it doing for them? How would they describe it to a friend? Some of those things up front really just help unmuddle the spaghetti of passion and ideas that you have, to help you really feel confident that you've got the brand that will meet that customer's needs. Your next stage is then kind of more operational, of the product development part. How does that translate into a product? How do you find the right manufacturer? How much investment do you have behind you? Because a lot of manufacturers will, insist on large runs of products because it's expensive and componentry. How can you work with somebody that shares your vision, and will do some of the research and development by your side to create a unique product in the market? at the right price that will allow you to take it to market on your website, but also with your retailer, who is going to ask for a significant margin. It could be up to 65% of retail less VAT that they would need to take from you. So it can be really chunky, and you've got to understand the costs of going to market and plan those out. And if you are deciding that you're going to go into wholesale and work with a retailer, then knowing what those costs are, because it won't only be that. It'll be shop fit, it'll be staffing, it will be media, it will be visuals, it will be testers, it will be a press launch, it will be an influencer and digital paid marketing campaign. There's lots of things there. I do think today there are other kind of cooler ways or smarter ways or smaller ways you can start if you don't have that funding. Whether you become
And
part
it
of a
kind of feels like vision is super key to all of this, because it feels
yeah,
like every touch point of this, your vision is going to help you not only sell,
yes,
but also secure the right type of partners that are
yeah,
going to buy in into that vision, that is going to
you're
buy in into you, and
yeah,
then also be able to
yeah,
give you that support. Especially because, I mean, at the end of the day, we're operating in a very crowded space, and you need
yes,
to kind of like start figuring out how you differentiate yourself and how do you
yeah,
put forward that
yeah.
vision.
I often say that, that bit about the customer and knowing your customer, that's the most important. And it's almost like the field of dreams, build it and they will come. That's definitely, you can't do that. Don't do that. But build your audience and make them part of your brand even before you've launched your product, because you're having a conversation with them. So build your audience and they will come. And that is also going to give you early door traction on your website and in your social media, your social selling, all of those things that will excite a retailer to say, yes, you've got customer connection. You're not just talking to yourself. You have to prove that the customer is interested today.
Yeah, I was having a chat recently with somebody who has spent a lot of time on corporate side. Some of a couple of very big brands, and she's now building her own brand, and she's like, I no longer have the resources of the corporate,
Mm,
so going to do customer research and going to do a lot of this stuff, like I know how to do it from a corporate point of view when I have all these resources available to myself. Now I don't. And we were discussing how we have done it in the
mm,
past,
yeah,
probably not specifically in the beauty space, but we've worked with some R&D departments of some of our portfolio brands to kind of like figure how to go and test some of these opportunities out there. But yeah, what's your take on that early bit? Like when, especially because even with all the funding in the world, you still,
oh, it could go
would
wrong.
want to, like how do you apportion some of that early on to validate that that bit, and also same way, probably touching into the whole going out of your home market point. The world is your oyster sort of thing, but also you need to prioritize where you start, and how do you start expanding, like the territory side of your brand, especially when you're operating already on a global stage in many ways
Yeah.
from day zero.
Yeah, I think, I came from Estee Lauder as well. I'd done 11 years with Estee Lauder before I went independent. And it is a little bit of a shock, when you haven't got anybody around you. And I've seen that with founders come through, and they're having to learn. And that's a good thing. You need to get stuck in, roll your sleeves up and get stuck in at the start, because you have to understand what you're doing, and you have to understand a little bit about lots of things, and then recognize, what am I really good at? What's my strength in this? Therefore, what do I need? And I think, building out that fractional support is really the way forward. I've seen too many brands hire really high level, and yet it's just too early for those people. So I think there's that at the start of it, um, and being a little bit scrappier, because the consumer today likes reality. They like to know what's going on. They like to see behind the scenes. They like your transparency. and finding those boutique independents that will help you get to a stage where you've got proof of product, and then you've got proof of concept, and then you've got something if you need that funding to show to an angel investor, family and friends, so you feel confident that you feel good about taking people's money as well as them being in a position to give it to you. Um, and I mean, there's various different ways to do that too. If you find you've got great people, I think today investors not just want to see you as a great individual, even if you've got 2 million followers or something, they also want to see that if you've never done it before, by your side, you've got advisors, who know how to do this, because there's so many things along the way. You don't know what you don't know. And if you fall in that puddle, you could really mess up your trajectory going forward. So yeah, I would say, proof of concept, first of product, proof of concept. I mean, at Trini, for example, we used to go around people's houses. So she had this crazy fan group, lovely, amazing women who really wanted to see her succeed. They'd followed her since her TV days. We used to go around her houses, their houses, and they'd bring 20, 40 women, and that would be our test group. And they so felt part of the journey. With Jamie Genevieve, when she went to the States, she was in the corner of a coffee shop and people would drop in. And so you don't always have to do these crazy things, and then your customers absolutely become your advocates, and you create a framework around community that will enable you to spread that message with real authenticity and passion. But the next stage is, really home market. Unless you've got something specifically made for the culture of another market, do it where you're close at hand and show that you really understand your home market and plan out what that distribution strategy is. And it can be really different by different brands. It's make sure distribution is awareness. So, if you put your product into the wrong channel, and the wrong profile of retail partner, just because they've asked you for it, it's so tempting to say yes. If it's not a match, if they're not kind of co-supportive, and if you don't have the money to do it, don't do it. It
Yeah,
costs
I
a lot.
think that's something that, oftentimes, and, I've been guilty of that as a founder,
Mm,
that you want to take on
me
all the
too.
opportunities that come your way. And I think something that I've learned a lot, especially over the last 4 years, is to be very conscious about the things that you say yes to and the things that you say
Yes.
no to, and why you're saying no to. And it's not about closing doors. It actually is about being, like, in a polite sort of way, transparent about why this opportunity might not be the right, or it might be that you might not be at the right time to be
Yeah.
taking some of the opportunities either. And I think it's an element of really, and I guess it goes back to understanding your customer and know your customer. Because if you actually, all the decisions that you make it with that customer, in mind, then it becomes easier to say no to those sort of opportunities, because that that's not the right,
Yeah.
opportunity to take on.
That is completely right. And we kind of build an understanding of that customer. But why did you build your brand in the first place? It's back to Simon Sinek's and the power of why. Why did you build
Mhm.
it? Who did you build it for? What is it? And then how are you going to market? That should be a really consistent pattern of train. And it's out there now, but when we launched Charlotte, she pulled together the phrase of easy to use, easy to choose, and easy to gift, you know, and that's like for a makeup brand and for a Hollywood makeup artist. But the reality was women found makeup a bit overwhelming, and finding the right lipstick shade or finding the right lip to go with the right cheek to go with the right eye, by making it easy and enjoyable, people buy more, they buy more readily. So easy to use, easy to choose. And also that giftability of makeup hadn't really been harnessed. So we had another opportunity. And that meant that everything we did, we'd ask that question: is it easy? Easy to use, easy to choose, and you can keep coming back to a core kind of signature of how you want to do business and who your customer is. And it keeps it consistent.
Yeah, I was talking to a founder recently, and one of the main chairs he had to chair was about the don't panic and don't force velocity, if you're not
Yeah,
ready. And I think the don't
yeah.
panic, it's such an important one, because again, right, as founders, and especially once you get certain momentum and velocity, it's easy to kind of like expect everything keeps the pace. Oftentimes it's good to just like take a pause, and doesn't mean that you're stopping everything. It's just a matter of knowing when to, kind of like take a pit stop, if you will, just to kind of like recheck and make sure that
Or to
you have the right things
recalibrate.
going.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's a recalibrate, this constant reset set and check in is really important. But if your team understand and you're all on the same, not just the same mission, but how to achieve the mission, then it just starts to flow. Um, but it's incredibly competitive out there, so I completely understand when people are like, if I don't hurry, I'll miss my opportunity. I'll miss my opportunity, and I get that, and I say sometimes, yeah, you might. Sometimes, yeah, you might. But if you can't afford to maximize that opportunity, you're going to get burnt. Um,
And
but
probably, going back to the fractional support that you can get,
yeah,
this is probably also important, right? For example, brands that might get access to somebody like you, or people that have been there, done that, that been through that journey, and
yeah,
being able to listen, and to learn from that, previous experience of others. And it could be that is, within this world, or even before, when you were talking about, going to people's houses and stuff like that, it reminded me when I read the book of Mary Kay, and how she got
yeah,
started at the beginning, and and everything that set the ethos for that brand, but also what she was trying to accomplish with her work. And
yeah,
the fact that she started very, on in her life and in her career, but what she was able to build, doing starting small, and building that sort of community, and focus on the community, and and
yeah,
growing that bit. And
yeah.
oftentimes, in tech, they say do things that don't scale at first,
Do
because
they?
then you're going to get a big handle on how that grow.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, if you've got, I mean, you could have hundreds of thousands of followers, but if they're not engaged, it's a bit meaningless. If you've got 4,000, 5,000, I mean, Trini, I think, had 4,000. That's all at the start, And at Charlotte, we had 2,000 followers on Instagram. It was early days of Instagram, but harnessing the passion of those was really important. So if we and this piece that we were just talking about, this start small but start strong. Start strong. You only launch once, so start strong, and clear. We would never launch without lots of pre-visits to the city, not just the retailer, to the city. We'd go to the makeup artist school. We'd basically hire and convert, and get loads of content out of it. And every store only open with magic cream and one to glow, because you can't have great skin without great makeup. But it was the most expensive product, and it became a real core item in the range. And it created such anticipation and excitement. On launch day, we would be overwhelmingly, seriously rammed. The police shut us down at one point. And, we were outside John Lewis doing a launch, and it's the steps that you take before that are really important. And it's this kind of how do you build your audience? How do you tease your message? How do you start to seed with more clarity? How do you then take over and do something impactful? And that doesn't mean loads of money. It's just impactful to your audience, knowing that you've got to sustain that and then spike again, sustain, spike, so that you get some really strong momentum from a strong foundational base.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Everybody, like there is no one single point in a journey, that is key. It's a combination of them,
Yeah,
consistent sort of way that builds up, because you get those, like just spikes, and especially if
yeah,
those spikes are not follow, there is always going to be the trend afterwards. And I think what you were talking about, quality versus quantity, and
yeah.
especially in a world that we live today, where
Hmm.
people expect to have, hundreds of thousands of followers or whatever, from day zero sorts. We tell this to our customers, even, some of the bigger ones. You want to be focused on quality of interactions, quality of community, rather than quantity. Because it can actually fire back at you, because if you have
Mm.
a lot of engagement for the no quality engagement, but actually that doesn't convert into what you're actually aiming for, and actually
Yeah.
speaks you know more detrimental to your brand than actually the other way around, because
Yeah.
then like they're not really your customers. It's more about engaging with
Yeah.
content or whatever, right? But it's really having a handle
Yeah.
on that quality ratio. uh
Yeah, because, like I was saying, distribution is awareness. Your audience really defines your brand, and I think that you really, you know, it's quite an interesting, because community should happen organically. Community should happen, because people love you beyond product. They love your values, they love the conversations, and it just starts to go wider. But they want to be part of your brand. So if you can, from that real core quality, I was saying to somebody the other day, who are your top 10 customers? Go pick up the phone to them, and make them the core. How many times have they repeat purchased from you? Make them part of your brand, because they want to be, because they love what you're doing. They love your product, but they also love your ethos. And, if you can do that and then start to create a loose structure to help them know how to be part of your brand, and give your community different elements of participation, whether that is creating user generated content, whether that is just being part of a testing group, a focus group, or actually just even coming into store and getting in the queue and being the first people there because they want to, but it also looks good. you know I think you can really utilize the people that love you, even if it is just 10 people. That can really spread if you harness the passion, and they become almost part of your team.
Now, when it comes to going out of your home market,
Hmm.
um, like what do you think are the key components to have in place? And early on we were talking about being intentional right from the beginning. About
Yes.
that expansion, about knowing that if everything goes successful, you want uh, you want to have that. How do you choose your your first market?
I think the great thing is just you'll know your social media audience. You'll know maybe your customer wanting to purchase from you from other markets that you're either fulfilling or you can't fulfill because of various different reasons. So know that you've got an audience there to start with. That really does want to know, to get to know and understand your brand more. And alongside that, know that there is, because beauty audience is global, so they'll find you. That top line passionate audience is global. Making sure there's a cultural alignment with that market and your brand, but also thinking about some of the operational things, compliance, shipping. And if you actually have to store the product abroad, so if you have to have two-way, if you can't ship out of the UK and you have to find a warehouse, then that's also going to split your product. This is quite basic, but sometimes people don't really think about it. So suddenly, you're going great guns in the UK, and because you want to launch, I don't know, in Australia, that would be far flung, but you want to launch it, and it's a like market to some degree, and you've had to put part of your product there, you're going to lose sales. So you've really got to wait for the right moment and think again about creative ways to do that. Dependent upon your brand, either you're a big brand going there and your audience is there, and again, you want to build that prior anticipation before you're even selling your brand. You want to test the market. You might be part of a pop-up activation. There's lots of different things that you can do, but I think making sure that you've got kind of good, strong operational foundations that enable you to do that well. The customer today is really demanding. They expect everything, and they've seen slickness. They've seen the slickness of Amazon operating globally, and presume everybody can do that. So either you will go with a partner, or you can actually seed it digitally up front. That will also excite the retailer. So if you decide to go via wholesale, they need to know you've got an audience in market and you can prove that. They need to see that and know that the customer will have some awareness. The retailer will not launch you. They'll play a part. And if you're a big brand, they'd love to play a bigger part if you're a brand with a big audience. But outside of that, you've got to rely on what you yourself can do to drive the customers into those stores, which is going to get you the success, better negotiation power, and also harness the additional traffic of incremental new customers that you can get. But I would
Yeah,
say,
and I think,
mm,
yeah, sorry, Finn.
sorry, no, just know your customer is there, build your audience and excitement up front, and make sure that you're operationally in a good place and financially in a good place to be able to do it well.
Yeah, no, something that we've seen with one of our, the beauty brands in our portfolio is also the halo effect that a lot of the pay media side of it has had on store. And
Hmm.
actually, and we've been able to see it because of, how close we track the data and, the buybacks and,
Yes,
and all this, but also it's understanding kind of what that impact is and also understanding how did that play in your whole marketing play. We've seen now, with this brand in particular, we're starting to do a lot more top of funnel focus on that retail bit that doesn't necessarily follows, or falls within the budget for performance, because obviously performance gets evaluated on, on a ROAS basis, but
yes,
and it's a very fully attributed piece that you want to drive to your own direct to consumers channel. But seeing and valuing, that halo effect that you can do. And and with them, we've seen that the allocations that some of the retailers are doing is a lot bigger. It's accelerating the sellout through those, and and how you can actually control some of that success yourself
yes.
as well.
Well, I think whenever you launch with a retailer, they'll be looking at wanting to talk to you about what's your influencer program, what's your social media program, how are you going to combine your content with them, how what's your paid media program, as well as utilizing their own media, library of opportunities. It's very much a complete conversation. Um, and I think you're absolutely right about a halo effect. There is a statistic, I'm not sure how true it is anymore, but there was a statistic that when you land on the ground, as Charlotte used to call it, you land on the ground, your business in the air goes up by about 35% plus if you do it right. And if you connect that whole customer journey, not only can be the payback if you focus it on the stores and it's a service experience or it's a PA, it's all a customer recruitment connection, and then it's up to you to do all of that follow through to make sure it's a customer retention and loyalty program as well. It's complicated today, to be honest. That customer journey is very complicated, and really carefully considering it through, so that you can get the best from all your channels is really important.
And I think it's again goes back to that intentionality and
Mm,
being as much in control of the experience as possible, because ultimately at the end of the day, it pays a big portion into how you get perceived, I guess, for lack of a better word. um,
mm,
Obviously, loyalty and trust is probably more important in this sector than many other
yes,
sectors, especially because you want to be building a relationship, for the long term with your customer, with your community. It's not a one-off type of transaction. It's something that you really would like to build in, especially if you're operating on low margins because of the kind of like the mix that you're in. And it can goes back to pricing strategy, um,
yes,
but making sure that you build that experience
yeah.
and that loyalty is super important.
Yeah, and if you go into you're doing well on D2C, you choose to go into retail for a reason, which is often to expand your customer base, and because your customers want an experience, as you say, that you can only do face to face in real life, and that's where you get the win-win situation with your retailer, because they have the bricks and mortar to enable that experience to come to life in some shape or form, obviously dependent on the type of distribution that you're working with. But experiential retail is kind of probably slightly overused as a term, but actually really thinking outside the box of how How do you want your customer to experience your brand? That can simply be in the merchandising. It can be in your point of sale materials. It can be on your pack, thinking about your outer pack from day one. Back to intentional. That's really important. If it's going to be on a shelf and there's loads of other products there, will the customer understand what your brand is about, in the kind of less than 30 seconds, 2 seconds scroll or whatever it is, as she glances by. So, but that could be a great big promotional site, or that could be you doing some guerrilla marketing across the city, and tying that in with your paid media, paid influencer campaign. It's a jigsaw that has to come together. But
And
you've got to think
it
about why she
very
shops.
much touches, connects back to your values and, what you stand for a
Mm-hmm.
brand.
Yeah.
I had an experience yesterday in Boots. And again, right, it has a big, beauty space now, and it's managed by themselves. And yesterday I was there with my wife and a friend, and we were buying some presents for my friend's wife. Uh, and so he had a very particular list of things he wanted to buy from. And there was one product that was not available yesterday. And so my wife is like, "Oh, can I, get connected with with the girl that does this other brand?" And she's like, "Oh no, I do the whole floor." And that was quite a bit, kind of shock, on us yesterday, because usually you have
Mm.
dedicated staff, per brand or cluster of brands or whatever, that they know the product very, very well. But
Yeah.
yesterday for us, I was, and I was thinking, leading up to today's recording, it's like, wow, like this is becoming even more difficult, because even with your retail space, suddenly you're now competing, even,
Mm.
and I'm sure it will be different from a Jean Louis or a Fenwick or a Sephora or well, I mean, Sephora is probably going to be similar, or your Selfridges.
Yeah.
But how, like you even stand out, or make your brand stand out in a way that
Well,
makes that experience
yeah.
unique within the generalization of some of that retail space.
Well, more and more stores have got shared staff across brands, and it's just, a factor of retail. I mean, it's something like 72% of the beauty customers still shops in stores. It's huge. It's the D2C side, the websites is the faster growing, but and it's
And it's
normally a
probably
norm.
where you would want to take your customer to, because then you build that direct experience. But people still want to, to experience and touch and
Yeah.
build that.
And the customer's going to make the choice at the end of the day. They'll sometimes, I mean, I was talking to some staff the other day, and they said about 30% of people come in, try the product, and then say, "Thanks very much, I'm going to buy it on the site or over here that's got an offer." But to your point, I think one of the things, even from my very early days in retail, I launched lots of brands in Space and K, in Boots, I did tons of work, and it is really helping them, because it's a challenge to know a ton of brands. Don't give them like a huge manual of education. It's not going to work. Really shaping training programs that are kind of sound bites, that allow the customer to delve deeper, but allow her to get sufficient knowledge that is going to help most customers, who will also be looking on their phones as well, but it's going to be able to articulate that brand properly, and really respecting, supporting, and celebrating them is something I think less and less brands do, less and less than they did when they had more field sales teams going out and kind of nurturing the stores. But it is tricky, and I think that's really a solution that is needed, of how do you truly give this smooth experience where the customer feels confident in her choices and that they're completely right for her. But if you're a smart brand and you've got it all on what's happening on your site, I call it the trading mechanic. It's like a really core mechanic of education is happening on your site, is happening in your social, and then is happening in your merchandising. If there's nobody there, it's easier for the customer to self-select.
Yeah, I think that's great. And now we're seeing tools that are coming online, that allows you to, do a, like a self assessment, I guess, for lack of a better word,
Mm-hmm.
of your own skin, and then matching that to your own products. And I think, like this, like you said, is this move to D2C, fast growing, full of challenges as well. but
Yeah,
full of opportunities as well, because there is a lot of white space to be
there
filled
is.
with new opportunities.
Yeah.
We have from a company of ours called Sopos that does sampling at scale as well,
Hmm.
which is again taking something from the offline experience that works very very well in the sense of beauty and um, um, body care and stuff like that, and then putting it in a digital format that allows
Yes.
brands to tap into that, even as a way to do market research potentially, and figuring out some of these
Yes.
partners and that have already the infrastructure and the capability that will allow you to do some of this work that otherwise would be uh, very cumbersome.
Yeah, yeah. It's thinking creatively, really, isn't it? And thinking with, an understanding of how the customer feels. How does she want to shop? I mean, you have customers, it's like multi-generational. They all shop differently, multi-channel, multi-social, multi-geography. And multi-category. There's a lot going on, and multi-values. There's a lot going on. And that's why, in a way, it's really hard. It's more hard than ever to be something to everybody. Actually back down to knowing your customer and really focusing on your core customer. And then, okay, if there's pockets and there's other customers that are interested, but really harnessing down on the loyalty via the core customers. And really back to, it doesn't sound very exciting, but navigation. Is it easy to choose? Is it easy to find what you're looking for? Does that, you're making that journey unnecessarily hard. So navigation, education, giving the customer what she needs to know. She'll want to know more than ever. But in sound bites, and she can extend her knowledge or just get it in a snapshot. And connection, the emotional connection. So I always use those words because, as you say, there's tons of white space in beauty. Is the average conversion, decent conversion, is 3 to 5%, which to me feels horrific, knowing how much money you spent getting the customer there in the first place. In store, it's 20 to 40%, which is so much better, but it still feels, if they've made the journey to come out to see your brand and to shop with the intention of spending, I think there's so much opportunity, around the whole omnichannel journey to maximize both those channels.
Yeah, no, that is great. So, Noel, like, what would you say are probably the best advice you can give brands who are already up and running, who have got a handle on the home market, and that they are starting to think about the what's next. And I think that what next can have multiple views. Obviously,
Yes.
starting with the end in mind, is super important right from the beginning. But probably not a lot of people would have had that up front.
Hmm.
So like, is this a moment to start thinking, right, where are we going? Like,
Yeah.
let's if we haven't done it, let's do that future piece
Yeah.
on it already, and then kind of start working backwards. Like, what do you think you would recommend founders who are already
Um,
started on that journey?
I think when you're thinking about your next stage, look inwards first, understand your foundational base is first place, and then think about what does that foundational base enable you to do? Where should your growth therefore come from? Should it come from new customers in your home market or new customers in a new market? Have you really tapped that out? And how are your current customers going to lay a really strong understanding of the new customers that you want to acquire, whether it's in your market or outside your market? That growth could come from new categories. It could come, you're so aligned to a new category that would make so much sense in your customer range journey that you should consider evolving your categories and growing your average sale and growing your range usage, which will also grow your frequency of spend potentially. It could come through new retail. If you're looking at new markets, though, it's back to what we said at the start. Are you operationally sound to be able to do that? Are you financed to be able to do that? And I think the other piece of advice, which I haven't mentioned, is finding the right partner. Find the right partner to help you, and that's a tricky thing. So growth. There's so many community events in beauty. Ask for advice from others who have been there. Ask for recommendations, because different people might be right, for different brands, and some people will be terrible and some people will be brilliant. So if you've got a connection that would work with a partner that you would respect and that has access to the distribution channels that you see, then finding the right partner to guide you through that market is really so important. Whether that is, commercial and a distributor, whether that's the logistics side, the PR and awareness side, because PR still plays a factor, and any other agencies that you want to work with. So think about where you want to take your growth. Do you have core foundations in strategy and operations? And then what's the additional support that you need that's right for you?
Right. That is great, Noel. I really appreciate you taking the time today to speak to
That's
us.
great.
And I feel like there's been so much knowledge. This is such a concentrated episode because there's so much knowledge and so many points that people can actually take and and go and explore. Obviously, like you said before, including yourself and the work that you do and that you put out. To that point about finding the right partners, I think it's so important in anything that you do. And, having the humility to know what you don't know and where you need
Yes.
support, and appreciate and value as well the experience that others can bring to you, but also realizing whether it's the right person. Oftentimes, like you said, especially if you're doing the rounds on events and if you're doing the rounds and things, you probably will get access to a lot of potential talent. Knowing who's right for the stage that you're in, for the space that you're in, for the
Yeah.
values that you stand for, and building that relationship. It takes time. It's not a
Yeah.
one-off type of thing. It's a journey, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that when you bring some people into that journey, it's knowing that they would be there with you for a good portion of that journey, because it can also be expensive
Yeah.
doing this kind of like start and stop and start and stop, and I think having that very clear end in mind, it's gonna be super easy, make a
Yeah.
lot of things easier, I would
Yeah.
say, in the decision
Exactly.
making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Finding that right person. Finding the wrong person is incredibly expensive. Finding the right person, but also briefing them in the right way. You don't just
Yeah.
divorce from your business. Brief them, stay tight. Is what's really important too.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Noel. I really appreciate your time today. And for everybody, this is the LEAF Colectivo. Thanks for being with us today, and really looking forward for our next episode. I'll leave all of the contact info for Noel on our episode here, or where you're listening to this podcast. And yeah, really looking forward to our next episode. Thank you, Noel. Cheers. Bye.
Great. Thank you very much. Bye bye.